Sergeant Desmond O'Toole crouched behind a dusty concrete archway. He took a sip from the hydration tube against his neck. Ever since the occupation started a week ago, everything tasted like chalk. Even the purified water tasted gritty as it sloshed in his mouth before swallowing. Mech footfalls got ever closer. A shadow cast against the setting sun flowed over the architecture as it passed by, looking for insurgents like him. The rhythm of the footfalls remained constant, growing ever more faint. 5 more seconds passed until he allowed himself to breathe. After one more cautionary peek, he darted across the street into an abandoned corner grocer. Someone had been here before, but luckily, they'd only taken perishables, probably within hours of the occupation starting. There were still plenty of canned goods left. He loaded his ruck with whatever he could find. Beans, vegetables, even a tin of canned corned beef hash. Just as he turned to leave, he caught sight of the Holy Grail. Behind the checkout counter was a single jar of baby formula, much needed at their camp. Such was his excitement that he almost forgot to drop and cover while the whine of an enemy patrol's hovercraft scooted by. Luckily, they didn't double back. He cursed his carelessness. He never trained to be a combat soldier, let alone an insurgent leader. He was the leader of his regiment's marching band, after all. But when the Dracos appeared at the nadir of the planetary system, he received the same emergency recall and hurried training workup as the rest. Still, as intense as the training workup was, it couldn't match years of skills and instincts a more specialized combat soldier would have possessed.
To any AFFS freedom fighters in the area, this is Bubbles. Code word Riker, please respond. Again, code word Riker, please respond.
He scrambled for his radio and pressed the transmit button. "Read back as 2. I hear you, bub." He cut himself short as he realized the footfalls from the distant Draconis Combine mech had stopped. That can only mean one thing. "I'm compromised!" he yelled, switching off his radio in a hurry. He scrambled out of the shopping center, bag in tow. The hovercraft came screaming around the corner, machine gun bullets ricocheting around, pelting him with bits of asphalt and concrete as he ran into an alleyway. He found a side door to a business and tried the knob, but it was locked shut. He slammed it with his shoulder. It didn't give. He took cover behind the narrow side of a dumpster as the hovercraft, too wide for the alleyway, sat at the entrance, blazing away with machine gun fire. The buzzsaw of machine guns, bullets that pelted the far side of the dumpster was so deafening that he didn't hear or feel the mech. It wasn't until it stood at the other end of the alleyway, boxing him in, that he saw it. A Vulcan in full Draconis Combine livery. The pilot light of the mech's flamer flickered a menacing blue as it was leveled at him. All movement and thought froze as time stood still. He tried to look away, but couldn't. Petrified by fear and the inevitability of his end, all he could do was close his eyes. One second passed, and then 2. He reminded himself to breathe. Instinctually, he ran his hands over his body, checking for extra holes. There were none. The enemy mech was still there, but facing the other way, the arm mounting the flamer lying on the ground, severed. At the far end of the clearing was another mech, a larger one, different from any he'd ever seen. A female voice reverberated across the city from the new mech's loudspeakers.
Draco pilot, power down your stompy boy and surrender all friendly like. I got 2 barrels of cockpit to canoe technology aimed straight at your glass and a finger that's itching for a boat trip.
Neither mech moved. Time ticked by. Each second felt like an eternity to Desmond. He wondered why the Combine mech just didn't surrender. Then he got his answer. From behind the friendly mech, he saw movement. He retrieved a monocular scope from his breast pocket, and through the shattered glass, he saw it. A Draconis Combine Hetzer inching its way slowly, sneakily around a corner, bringing its assault gun to bear at the fragile rear armor of his new savior's mech. He brought his radio up. "Bubbles, behind you!" he yelled. No response. He looked down in horror to see that his radio was still switched off. He frantically switched it back on. "Behind!" was all he managed to say. Right before... One moment. Sorry guys, had an elderly Free Worlds League expat who tried to take his tramp-stamped awesome over to my employer's castle, who is an elderly Lyran expat, to reenact the Bull and Thumb campaign. Needless to say, the locals don't take too kindly to their real estate becoming war zones to settle ancestral grudges. And the last thing you want is for periphery locals to start turning their moonshine stills into artillery. It's happened before, and let me tell ya, not even clan tech can match the killing power of something created from an acetylene torch, a grudge, and a blood alcohol high enough to try anything here in the periphery. Oh no, that's not good. So, today's mech sets the stage for the Dark Age. I would elaborate more, but I gotta go because it looks like Meow Rick just hijacked the awesome. Let me take care of this and I'll get back to you. The events described have been summarized for the sake of brevity. In 3052, the clans lost a trial possession on the world of Tukian, binding them to a 15-year halt, on their honor, to the invasion of the Inner Sphere. Fast forward 5 years, and a minor difference of opinion began to emerge. The head of the clans, Ilkhan Ulrich Karinsky, along with the current heads of Clan Wolf, Khan Natasha Karinsky, and Sakan Fallon Ward, had every intention of keeping the truce. However, Clan Wolf loremaster Dalk Carnes, along with Star Captains Vlad Ward and Mariel Radek, were part of a faction that felt the truce was depriving them of the honor and glory of conquest in their lifetime. They partnered with Jade Falcon Khan Elias Critchell to bring up charges of treason against Ilkhan Ulrich Karinsky. One thing led to another, and they ended up settling their differences of opinion in the most dignified format befit of a technologically and socially advanced civilization the clans claim to be. Total war! What would become known as the Refusal War deserves its own video. In short, Ulrich knew his chances of winning in survival were more bleak than the last Cram Rangoon on Stefan Maris's plate, and decided to make the war so costly it would be impossible for the crusading factions to resume hostilities with the Inner Sphere. To this end, he achieved his goal, at the cost of his life and that of Natasha Karinsky. Vlad Ward would become the Khan of the new clan Jade Wolf. This would return to being called Clan Wolf a year later when Vlad learned that Ulrich had been killed under less than honorable circumstances by the Falcons, and proceeded to beat Critchell and a subordinate, Van der Van Christu, apologies if I butchered that name, to death in ritualistic combat. As you do in advanced societies, apparently. Are you paying attention? Good, because this is important. Phelan Ward, aka Phelan Kell, meanwhile, took what loyal forces he had and used his Inner Sphere familial ties to establish an enclave in the Lyran Commonwealth world of Ark Royal. After all, he wasn't born a clanner, but had been taken as a bondsman early in the clan invasion. Through cunning, bravery, luck, and just a little bit of plot armor, he managed to rise to the ranks of the second highest position within Clan Wolf. Once the exiled members of Clan Wolf, renaming themselves the Wolves in Exile, points for creativity there, arrived at Ark Royal, they took their position in the Ark Royal Defense Cordon, on the front lines between the Lyran Commonwealth and Clan Jade Falcon. This was fortunate for the Lyrans, as the Wolves in Exile were instrumental in holding the Jade Falcons back every time the beaky bastards felt a little uppity, which turns out to be every other Tuesday. Fast forward from 3058 to 3078, and the Wolves in Exile were holding on by a thread. With the Lyrans beset by the Word of Blake and Jade Falcon being, well, the Jade Falcons, the order of battle was looking a bit worse for wear. They needed new mechs, badly. This prompted Confale and Kel to sponsor several initiatives to build second-line mechs using on-hand inner-sphere components to fill in the ranks. And thus, the Mangonel was born. The first variant to come on the scene was the 3L variant, or as I like to call it, the Lima. At the cost of $13,421,500 C-bills and 21 cents, it comes standard with an Endosteel chassis surrounded by ferrofibrous armor, as well as a K9 con system, a Type 5 Bloodhound targeting and tracking system, industry standard heated mirrors, anti-lock stopping servos, and a fresh new mech smell. Nothing to write home about, really. The Manga 350 light engine will propel the mech up to 86 km per hour, which is slightly above the average for a 70-ton mech. Primary armament is a pair of Korean, with a C, light Gauss rifles. But with only 8 rounds of ammunition for each gun, it's a mech that's tied down to its supply lines. Secondary armament is 4 Inner Sphere Tech ER medium lasers, 2 in each turret that function as the arms. The lack of traditional arms limits its ability to self-recover from a fall, but does allow the mech to engage enemies that appear behind it by flipping its weapons backwards. However, should this become necessary, the mech has greater problems. A pilot would be wise to keep moving, as this is not a mech designed to take a hit. Those Gauss rifles sitting right next to the pilot, well, they tend to express displeasure with battle damage by exploding in spectacular fashion. This can make piloting the Lima one of the more disconcerting assignments a pilot could have, as there is no case to protect the pilot in the event of said explosion. This is not helped by having a mere 143 points of armor. That's bad. To put this into perspective, there's only one combat mech of 70 tons or greater I could find that is less armor than this. That is still in service, mind you. And that is the original variant of the Victor. Reportedly, some pirate bands still use it as an AC-20 platform. Furthermore, the mech is reported to be difficult to maintain, meaning this mech's niche capabilities may be hard to justify when weighed against the maintenance, repair, and overhaul costs. While the stats of the Mangonel 3L are not spectacular, remember it entered service with the Wolves in Exile at a time of desperation. As stated in a previous video, mechs are still the apex predator on the battlefield, and despite its flaws, there is no indication that it failed in its role. While its armor protection was weak for a 70-ton mech, it still had more armor than the 65-ton Hellbringer, and was comparable in capability to the Linebacker. 2 second-line mechs it was slated to replace in service with the Wolves in Exile. It was also far cheaper to procure and operate when compared to the previous 2 mentions. Second-line mechs don't have to be the biggest or the best. They just have to be able to deal with the smaller, more nuanced problems, so that their larger brethren can deal with the peer or near-peer threats. Mech production is a huge investment, often requiring vast industrial and technological resources within an interstellar supply chain. To put this into perspective, when another 70-ton mech, the Cataphract, entered service with the Capellan Confederation in 3025, it was the technological limit of what an entire successor state could produce from the ground up. The mere fact that the Wolves in Exile were able to bring a mech of this tonnage into being in the middle of a 2-front conflict is a feat into itself, albeit with the help of the industrial might of the Lyran Commonwealth and that of Ark Royal specifically, which is no industrial pushover. But this begs the question, what if wartime constraints were relaxed? What if we could give the 3L a clan makeover? Mangonel 3W clan makeover, 'cause you're worth it. Ladies, gents, and all lovers of mechs, I give you the 3W, or as I like to call it, the whiskey. This upgrade raises the cost from 13 to just over 16 million C-bills, but in return, it puts the Mangonel on another level. Clan-Tech Gauss rifles are fitted in place of two Intersphere ones, nearly doubling the long-range firepower, and literally doubling the ammo capacity. The ER lasers are upgraded to Clan-Tech lasers, further increasing the damage output. Overall, the Alpha Strike damage potentials increase from 36 to 58, and the addition of two double heat sinks means a mech can run an Alpha Strike while remaining heat neutral. The defensive systems gets a much needed TLC as well. The integrated Clan K systems ensure that should one of the Gauss rifles go critical, the explosion would not make it beyond the torso they are mounted in, saving the pilot and potentially saving the mech. There is an ECM suite as well, allowing the mech to better integrate with the fog of war.
Crank the music.
But the most stunning improvement of all is the armor. An additional 1.5 tons is applied, increasing it from a paltry 143 points to a respectable 182. These improvements vault the Mangonel from an emergency second-line mech to a sniper capable of holding its own on the modern battlefield. So we've witnessed the good enough variant in the Lima. We've witnessed the bourgeois with the whiskey. What's next for the mischievous Mangonel? Could it be a happy medium? Well, my friends, that's where it gets really interesting. Enter the 4S, the Sierra, if you will. It uses the same Intersphere armor, chassis, and engine of the Lima, but it guts the Intersphere weaponry, exchanging the two light Gauss weapons for a massive 21-ton Hyper Assault Gauss 40 in the torso. This chonker has the potential to put out 40 points of damage, albeit scattered damage at the same range of any Gauss variant. It makes one think that the Whiskey and Sierra variants were meant to be operated in tandem, with the Whiskey in the lead, protecting its compatriot with the ECM suite, cracking open armor with its Gauss rifles, while the Sierra's HAG-40 sprays the target, looking for juicy bits under that cracked armor to disable. Furthermore, the single HAG-40 is a full 4 tons lighter than the two Intersphere railguns. 2 of those tons are invested into the secondary armament, replacing 2 of the ER mediums with heavier, shorter-ranged, but far more accurate pulse lasers to further deter speedy flankers. The lack of case protection is still an issue, as it was with the Lima, but less likely than with the earlier variant due to the remaining 2 tons being allocated to the armor. This means that while the Whiskey is still the best armored of the 3, the Sierra is only 3 points behind the Whiskey in armor protection. However, there is one subtle trait that sets the Sierra apart: the cost. Even with Clan-Tech weaponry, the 4S variant is the cheapest of the 3. While a savings of 100,000 C-bills when compared to the Lima doesn't seem like much, for its value, it's hard to beat. It's no surprise that the 4S would be the most prolific of the trio, with units being purchased by the Tamar Pact, the Rigelian Fiefs, and even the newly reformed Free Worlds League. The Lyran Commonwealth would take both the Sierra and Whiskey on strength, while the Wolf Empire would take a few 3Ws into the fold, possibly hand-me-downs from the Republic and the Wolves in Exile, though I wouldn't be surprised if a few new builds found their way into Alaric's Tolman. All 3 variants would be found in the ranks of various mercenary companies when their cash and credit would exceed the number of viable units in their mech bay. Several pilots of the Lima would go on to fight for the Republic of the Sphere, making it the only non-mercenary faction outside the Wolves in Exile and the Kellhounds to operate all 3 variants. And we will get back to that in a little bit. Furthermore, some reports indicate that a few of these mechs had been rearmed with autocannons in place of Gauss rifles in the waning days of the Republic. This would make sense as viable platforms would be pressed into service in those desperate days. Desmond opened his eyes. The friendly mech was gone. The enemy Vulcan lay face down in the courtyard, and a crater sat where the Hetzer was. He grabbed the edge of a dumpster to stand up when suddenly...
All nurses to the nurses station.
He was gently nudged awake hours later, resting on a letter he didn't remember lying down on. Beside him, the field hospital was being completed where the Vulcan fell earlier. "Rise and shine, partner," came a female voice. Who are you?" He sat up in his cot, only then realizing there was an IV in his arm. He squinted as he tried to make out the face of who he was talking to against the glare of the setting sun. "No one special. They told me you were the one that answered the radio when we first came to town." Yeah. Just hope that mech pilot made it." "Oh, she did. Thanks to you." She flipped a coin into his lap, tipped her hat, and walked off on a pair of the fanciest cowboy boots he's ever seen. "Be seeing ya!" He ran his fingers over the coin that she tossed to him. It was one of those finely crafted challenge coins units gave as a sign of respect. One side was engraved with the numbers 3, 7, and 77, and on the other, the initials AGH. The Alder Gulch Headhunters. The miniature you are seeing is modeled after the Lima variant that entered service with the Republic of the Sphere, and highlights the phenomenon of the Republic. Mech warriors, particularly from around Terra and the Chaos March, would flock en masse to join up with the newly created Republic Armed Forces in the early 3080s. Some say the Republic formation was a prudent reaction to the terror of the Word of Blake Holy War. Others would call it a knee-jerk trauma response to decades of brutal conflict. But nothing happens in a vacuum. What would cause a mech warrior to surrender their previous allegiances and fight on behalf of an upstart power? Furthermore, what would prompt the Wolves in Exile, or the Kellhounds, to willingly hand over not just 13 million seabills worth of military hardware, but also a pilot whose training and experience could be valued far higher? What was it about the war against the Blakeists that allowed such a reaction? The war itself was brutal, don't get me wrong, but what brought the major powers together to take such action that the wanton destruction of the Secession Wars, the shock of the Klan invasion, and the chaos of the FedCom Civil War wouldn't? In future videos, we will be addressing what brought these major powers together to form this cornerstone of a new galactic order. Why so many, from humble laborers and mech warriors to heads of state, were drawn by the promises offered by Devlin Stone and the Republic's formation like a moth to flame, and why it inevitably and spectacularly failed. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I would encourage you to seek out the artists listed. They are absolutely amazing. Please let me know what I can improve on going forward. Know that I do not take your viewership for granted, and I appreciate each and every one of you. As always, be kind to yourself and to others, and act on said kindness, and do not go quickly, dishonorably, or quietly into that good night. Take care. Yarrick, you mean you were an undercover cop this whole time? Boy, the periphery sure is a strange place.